Good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be welcoming both presenters and attendees from across the world today. I'm Hannah Weissman, Executive Director of the Magnus Collection of Jewish Art and Life. If you're new to the Magnus, we are a museum and research center at the University of California, Berkeley, that is dedicated to generating new knowledge and understanding of Jewish cultures with and for our academic and public communities. Today's symposium is a capstone event for a 5-year curatorial partnership between Doctors Francesco Spagnolo and Kamar Adamji that resulted in their co-curated exhibition In Plain Sight, Jewish Arts and Lives in the Muslim World, which was on view at the Magnus from August 27th, 2024 to May 15th, 2025. The exhibition and its related programming has engaged university faculty and students in support of academic study, as well as classes from regional secondary and supplementary schools and thousands of public visitors. And it has created opportunities for collaboration with a wide range of community partners. Please join me in thanking the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, the David Berg Foundation, Kenneth Kaufman and Andrea King, as well as an anonymous donor for generously supporting the In Plain Sight project, including the curator's research process, the exhibition, and its related programming, including today's symposium. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Francesco Spagnolo, the senior curator at the Magnus and co-curator of In Plain Sight, Jewish Arts and Lives in the Muslim World. As senior curator, Francesco holds the primary responsibility for the intellectual and academic interpretation of the museum's holdings. His curatorial practice blends scholarship, storytelling, and technology. At the Magnus, he has curated 38 exhibitions and more than 200 public programs, mentored close to 100 students through the undergraduate research apprenticeship program, and taught innovative undergraduate and graduate courses. Francesco is also an associate adjunct professor in UC Berkeley's Department of Music and Center for Jewish Studies, and is affiliated with the Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion, the Institute for European Studies, the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, and the Religious Diversity Cluster of the Haas Institute. Thank you, Francesco, for convening today's symposium with Drs. Kamar Adamji and Emily Gottridge. I'm happy to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and welcome everybody. We see people are still trickling into the webinar. We're going to be together for approximately 3 hours. And as Hannah introduced so beautifully, we are discussing a variety of topics. We come from various countries, continents, and we'll be covering material culture under very different angles, both the practitioners, the curators, the scholars, and a little bit of everything in between and the interfaces between those. Before we start with the program, I want to first introduce my two co-chairs for this project. Kamar Damji is also my co-curator, and we'll have our last session in which we will talk more about the exhibition process, our methodologies, how we came about this theme, and how the whole exhibition developed, also working with UC Berkeley students over the years. Dr. Adamji is an art historian of the Islamic world and the Indian subcontinent. Formerly an associate curator of South Asian Islamic art at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, Dr. Adamji began her career in the Islamic art department at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and has recently returned to the Met as provenance researcher in the Asian art department. Dr. Emily Gottridge, Professor Emily Gottridge, is also a colleague at UC Berkeley, and she's a world historian specializing in Middle East and North African history with a focus on Jewish-Muslim relations. Her research currently works on revival of Jewish heritage sites in the contemporary Islamic world, and she will be leading a panel specifically on this with guests and presenters from Turkey and from Morocco. She received a BA in Middle Eastern Studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and an MA and PhD PhD in Middle Eastern Studies and History from Harvard, and she serves as adjunct professor of global studies, political economy at UC Berkeley, and as a senior researcher scholar at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. Among her publications, we can include the Melach of Marrakesh, Jewish and Muslim Space in Morocco's Red City, Jewish Morocco, a history from pre-Islamic to post-colonial times, and the co-edited volume Jewish Culture and Society in North Africa from 2011. She's a three-time Fulbright awardee to Morocco. She has all kinds of other incredible academic credentials, and she's a formidable colleague at UC Berkeley. So I'm really delighted to present this project with such wonderful colleagues. And we are switching out the plans because we have a little problem in connection from Morocco. So we were supposed to start today's, as if you those of you who are connected saw our web announcement. We're supposed to start with a conversation specifically with curators and contributors from Turkey and Morocco. We'll do that in the second session. Each session approximately lasts 1 hour, so we'll close it at we're starting now we started around 9 o'clock Pacific time, California time. We'll close around 10, and then we'll have a five-minute stretch where you will see beautiful objects from the exhibition and installation shots, and then we'll continue with the second session, again ending at the hour, and then the third one. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jewish Studies Beyond Borders, and our presenters, Mustafa Hussein from the University of Michigan and Edwin Seroussi from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Mustafa Hussein, and if you want to appear in video, Mustafa and Edwin, that's great, so that we see you. Thank you so much for participating today. We are very interested in your takes, both in terms of your specific research. Mustafa will be presenting on books and bookmaking, and Edwin Seroussi, Edwin will be presenting on music and music recording and music tracking in Jewish music in the Muslim world. But we're also wanting to have a conversation, so we'll use part of our time together to have a conversation on kind of some core ideas about what type of expertise, what type of competence is required to study Jews and Muslim cultures together. You both have dedicated a lot of your work to this, so we're eager to hear your impressions, both in terms of specifics of your research and just general guidelines of how we can move forward. Mustafa Hussein is Assistant Professor of Jewish Muslim Studies in the Judaic Studies Department at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. His scholarship focuses on Jewish-Muslim intersectionality, shedding light on the complex cultural historical interconnections between these communities in the Middle East. His forthcoming book is titled Hebrew Orientalism, Jewish Engagement with Arabo-Islamic Culture in the Late Ottoman and British Palestine, and it provides a nuanced understanding of Hebrew Orientalism by focusing on the practical activities of Hebrew writers, such as recuperating the Jewish past in the East, constructing Jewish indigeneity, consolidating Jewish ties to Palestine's landscape, enhancing understanding of the Hebrew Bible, reviving Hebrew language, and undertaking translation projects. He's also examining various perceptions of Jewish in the Arabic-speaking countries in the Middle East and the evolution of Jewish imageries from the late 19th to the late 20th century. He recently published a new book titled Remembering Jews in Maghrebi and Middle Eastern Media. It was Penn State University in September of 2024. Mustafa, if you want to take it on from here, we're delighted to have you as a contributor, and it's a pleasure to be together today.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for the conference organizers for having me to present today. I'll start by sharing my screen. Is it working?
It's working perfectly.
Okay, great. So since the 1967, the Jewish population in Egypt has dwindled until
Mustafa, excuse me, if you want to launch the slideshow, you can also do that. We see the whole PowerPoint right now. So if you prefer to have it as a slideshow, you can do that. Sorry for interrupting you at the beginning.
No.
I will
Thank
not
you.
do
Thank
that
you.
again, I promise.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay. Now I need to find my notes. All right. Since the 1967, the Jewish population in Egypt has dwindled until they have reached today less than a dozen of Jews living in the country of the Nile. Despite the near absence of the Jewish body from Egypt, Jewish history and culture has continued to attract the interest and the curiosity of the non-Jewish Muslim and Coptic communities. Historian David Nuremberg has shown that the writing about Jews is not always connected to and is often detached from the actual presence of Jews in one particular location. Diagnosing the interest in Jewish history in the European context, he notes that such a conversation about Jews was the point of entry for the expression of views about the European, Western, and Christian self, as it studies and depicts the Jewish other. These conversations then are often a way of expressing various ideological, theological, and political goals. Nirenberg's insights are helpful in the Arab and Muslim context to elucidate the imageries of Jews, where the Jew has often served as a metaphor in inter-Islamic and inter-Arab discussions to describe the Muslim and the Arab self. This framework helps us avoid the pervasive issue of Jewish tokenism, which undermines authentic representation by promoting superficial inclusion, perpetuating stereotypes, and flattening the rich diversity of Jewish identity in such a culturally rich country as Egypt, where not only Rabbinic Jews lived, but Rabbinic Jews, Karaite Jews, Jews from the Sfarad and the Orient, and Jews from Eastern Europe and Eastern Western Europe. Elsewhere, I studied non-Jews interact with Jewish spaces in Egypt and the various theological, ideological, and political objectives underpinning these cultural and intellectual activities. Interactions with these sites reveal the intricate interplay of internal and external factors, such as the dynamics between Jews and Muslims, the reverberations of the Arab-Israeli conflict, and the societal responses to Jewish culture. Today, I would like to explore the production of Arabic books in Egypt pertaining to Jewish history, culture, and religion. Every year, bookstores in Cairo, Alexandria, and other major cities within Egypt welcome the arrival of new books on Jews. Almost all these works were written, published, and distributed by non-Jewish publishing houses and individuals, such a cultural activity that requires further examination to understanding the motivations underlying these published works in the near absence of the Jew. Instead of exploring closely the content of the published works, I would like to focus on the employment of Jewish cultural materials and the messages they meant to convey to the readers and what they reflect about the theological, cultural, and political motivations of the creators of such content. If we were to take a look, for example, at the recently published books in Egypt, there is that, here I put some book covers by various authors, and here too another list of books. And I would like to focus here on the one single book and focus on the book cover specifically. And the book I chose is Albert Aryeh, مذكرات يهودي مصري, Memoir of an Egyptian Jew. Perhaps one of the most notable books I would like to discuss today is Albert Aryeh's memoir, مذكرات يهودي مصري, a memoir of an Egyptian Jew, was published in 2023, in 2 years after his passing away. Albert Aryeh was an Egyptian with secular Jewish roots. In his book, he defines his Jewishness as secular one. He was born in the culturally and religiously diverse cosmopolitan Cairo in 1930 to a middle-class Jewish family. His father hailed from Turkey at the beginning, came to Egypt from Turkey at the beginning of the 20th century, and his mother was born in Egypt in 1899 to a Russian Jew who had arrived in Egypt in 1890, presumably fleeing waves of persecutions in Eastern Europe and Russia at the time. Albert Aryeh was a communist activist, and his activism led to a 10-year imprisonment starting in the mid-1950s. His political engagement was deeply rooted in his love for Egypt, as he describes it in his book, and his time in prison taught him much about the Egyptian people. As he described it, those years in prison were the most fruitful of his life. I'm not sure anybody else would consider this, time in prison a fruitful time, but it can be. He had the opportunity to interact with many, many people, forge lasting friendships, and gain an in-depth understanding of Egyptian society. He was an outspoken anti-Zionist and opposed mass Jewish immigration to Israel. However, as he notes in his memoir, he was pragmatic in recognizing Israel's existence. He neither advocated for violence against it nor promoted peaceful relations with it. Arey also challenged the view that Egyptian Jews faced persecution following the establishment of the State of Israel. While acknowledging the difficulties Jews experienced due to the conflation of Judaism and Zionism, he resisted reducing the history of Jews, Egyptian Jews post 1948, to one of persecution and suffering. Um, uh, in reading Ari's memoir as an embodiment of the Jewish material culture in Egypt and part of the larger material culture of the country, I would like to focus here on analyzing the book cover. I was thinking, to bring in a number of book covers to analyze them, but unfortunately, due to time constraint, I will focus only on that book cover. Unlike the common saying that goes, never judge a book by its cover, I would like to literally judge a book by its cover in the time remaining. As we all know well, a book cover can reveal many, many dimensions about the life of the author, the content of the book, and the involvement of other actors in the making of such a piece of work. Many book covers are in themselves piece of art. They represent a collaboration between the author's vision, the publisher's marketing strategy, and the designer's creative expertise. The artistry of a cover can elevate the perceived value of the book and establish its place within a cultural or artistic landscape. It can become iconic, intrinsically linked with the book's identity and its reception by the public. The book cover's image features the author Albert Arey standing in a balcony, presumably in his apartment. Actually, he had an office apartment in downtown Cairo. The background, if we were to look, I will zoom in later. The background clearly shows a view of downtown Cairo with buildings characteristic of the city's architecture, which Arey talks about vividly in his biography. The balcony sitting places the balcony sitting places the man within the context of Cairo, suggesting his connection to the city and its history. Is Albert Arey a Jew in Egypt or an Egyptian Jew? What does this photo tell us about the sense of belonging he had exhibited throughout his life in the country, experiencing a lot of hardships and forging friendship? The overall composition is likely intended to evoke a sense of personal reflection and connection to place. The warm lightening and the man's serene expression suggest a contemplative and perhaps nostalgic tone. He talks about going back or thinking back about cosmopolitan Cairo, a country, and also Egypt, a country that was culturally and religiously pluralistic, that did not know religious extremism. The overall the warm the juxtaposition of Albert Arey with the iconic backdrop of Cairo visually represents the core theme of the book, the life and experiences of an Egyptian Jew within the context of Egypt's capital. What does the book cover reveal about the identity of the elderly man photographed on the balcony with Cairo in the background? Nothing much at first glance. Ari's round face, marked with wrinkles and lines, and his thin white hair are common among elderly Egyptians of his age. It's only with the addition of his name, actually, and the descriptor Egyptian Jew that his Jewish identity is highlighted while still acknowledging his Egyptian heritage. The text on the cover highlights the complexity of Ari's identity. In 1965, Ari fell in love with a Muslim woman and wanted to marry her, but their differing religions posed a significant challenge. As a Jew, Ari faced a religious hurdle because Islamic law states that a marriage cannot be performed if the husband or the would-be husband is a non-Muslim. Converting to Islam was a complex and difficult decision for him to make. Despite being secular, his mother opposed the conversion, viewing it as an opportunistic move to achieve personal gains, in this case, to marry. Ari's close Jewish friend, like Shahata Harun, he is the father of the current head of the Jewish community in Egypt, Magda Harun, also advised against his conversion. During the 1960s, the public sentiment in Egypt was unfavorable toward Jews due to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Harun initially suspected that Ari wanted to change his religion to avoid government scrutiny. Additionally, Ari's lover came from a religious family who would not accept a relationship not sanctioned by Islam. After his mother left Egypt for France in 1966, he decided to convert to Islam. Although no formal regulations required him to change his name after conversion, his wife insisted on it so that their children could avoid further difficulties stemming from their father's former Jewish identity. Under persistence from his wife, Ari agreed and changed his name to Adil Mukhtar. If we were to take a look, this is his birth certificate. He was born as Albert, and his name was Jack Ari, as we see here. And in 1966, upon conversion, he switched his name to Adil Mukhtar Ibrahim. That is based on the cinema membership card from 1969. But he notes in his memoir that he was reluctant about changing his name despite changing his religion. So he notes that privately he retained his original name, Albert Ari, by which his friends continued to know him. Ari's reluctance to convert to Islam likely reflects a deep connection to his Jewish identity, which would explain why he chose to keep his original name, Albert Ari, in private and among friends, and that's the name he chose to put in the book cover. Now, I would like to turn to the architectural features captured in the photo. What stands out from the image on the book cover is the balcony in which Ari is standing, as you see here. So the balcony exhibits characteristics of the late 19th century European influenced architecture common in downtown Cairo. It appears to blend elements of classical and perhaps some Art Nouveau or Art Deco influences in its decorative details. The building facade behind the balcony is constructed of brick. You see two different colors, the red and the gray. The original color of the building is gray, but after some renovations, they decided, maybe can't remember exactly when, they decided that's very recent, to give a red color to the facade instead of keeping the gray. So the balcony is part of 19th century European influenced multi-story building with the first floor includes retail stores. The building is commonly known in Cairo as Imarat Sawaris, Suarez Building, also known as Sun Life Canada. The building is in the heart of downtown Cairo on Qasr al-Nil Street. It was designed by the Italian architect of the Khedival Palaces, Antonio Lachac. Antonio Lachac was known to be the architect of Khedival Palaces, He is considered one of the great European architects working in Cairo between 1882 1930. He was known also for the integration of the new Mamluk style as found in the Arabian Rome in the new Renaissance palace of Yusuf Kemal in Al-Matariya in Cairo. Lashak is also known for designing outstanding buildings with attractive European architectural style affiliated with Jewish communities or Jewish individuals of Egypt. Perhaps one of the most notable buildings he designed was the building of the Jewish community in Alexandria, located in Nabi Daniel Street. The three-story building was owned by the late Raphael Sawaris. It was owned by a Jewish family bearing the last name Sawaris, a member of the Italian Jewish family that arrived at the beginning of 19th century from Livorno to settle in Cairo, Egypt. The founding father of the family's Egyptian branch was Isaac Sawaris, who began his career as Sarraf money changer. With the introduction of banking system in Egypt, he established a banking firm. His three sons, Joseph, Felix, and Raphael, founded in 1882 the bank Sawaris Frere, which became the engine of manifold investment and development projects. The three sons were commonly referred to as Ikhwan Sawaris, Sawaris brothers, who invested in a variety of projects, including railroad and transportation ventures and in urban real estate. In fact, they invested tremendously in transportation, and the wagons that was used by Egyptians in the 1930s and 40s were referred to as Sawaris, after the name of this family. The book cover also, as we see here, refers to a statue, which we can see in this picture, the statue of Mustafa Kemal. What does it symbolize? What does it convey? What does it relate to us? And how does it relate to Albert Ari himself? The book cover shows a picture of the Egyptian lawyer and nationalist activist and the founder of the nationalist party, Al-Hizb al-Watani, Mustafa Kemal. Kamel strongly opposed the British occupation of Egypt, which is something similar between him and Albert Ari's activism in opposing British colonialism and seeking the liberation of Egypt from the yoke of the British. Camel's nationalist sentiment are forever ingrained in the collective memory of the Egyptians, including, for example, the saying, "If I were not an Egyptian, I would ardently desire to be an Egyptian. لو لم أكن مصريا لوددت أن أكون مصريا." So, having him here in the picture, in the book cover, creates a connection between Mustafa Kemal's activism and Albert Ari's activism. In fact, this square, Midan, used to be named after Sawaris family because of the building. And in early 1940s, when the statue was located in that square, it took a different name after Mustafa Kemal, which is known today as Mustafa Kemal Square. Yeah, so to conclude, the absent presence of Jewish history and culture in the Arabic-speaking world is worthy of examination for two reasons. First, despite the absence of Jews from the Arabic-speaking world, their culture and history have continued to garner interest among non-Jewish communities. Their curiosity about Jewish matters can serve as a metaphor in inter-Islamic and inter-Arab discussions to describe the Muslim and the Arab self. Additionally, these engagements can add another layer to the Jewish life and culture that reveals its impact on the larger culture and society in Egypt. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mustafa, for teaching us how to judge a book by cover, and for sharing such incredible insights on, well, I could go on, but I will not. I will hand the microphone over to Professor Edwin Cerussi, and so that we can have a little time afterwards to also share a few thoughts together. Dr. Cerussi is an Emanuel Alexander Professor Emeritus of Musicology at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Chair of the Academic Committee of the Jewish Music Research Center, and most recently was a visiting scholar at Yale University Institute of Sacred Music. His research focuses on Jewish musical cultures of the Mediterranean and Middle East and their interactions with Islamic cultures, Judeo-Spanish song and music in Israel. He explores processes of hybridization, diaspora, nationalism, and transnationalism in diverse contexts and historical periods such as the Ottoman Empire, colonial Morocco and Algeria, Germany's Second Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Judeo-Spanish-speaking global diaspora. Besides his academic activities, Dr. Cerussi is also active in the music scene in Israel and abroad in diverse capacities as producer, advisor, member of the Board of Musical Institutions, and representative to the International Music Council of the UNESCO. He's been awarded several prestigious prizes, among them the Israel Prize in the field of musicology for 2018. Edwin, it's your turn to share some thoughts and some songs with us. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Francesco, for this kind introduction, and thank you and the Magnus and Berkeley for this kind invitation to participate in this webinar. And Professor Hussein, or if I can call you Mustafa, it's poetical that following your presentation is a grandson of a quintessential Egyptian Jew who grew up with the spirit of the culture that you were describing as it was displaced to very far away in South America. And to link that to my short presentation, before I move into the PowerPoint, I can tell you that one of the main markers of Egyptianness of my grandpa and his friends was the sounds coming from their mouth. But those sounds to us as young Latin Americans sounded very weird. Only when I moved to the Middle East and my life changed, I reconnected with my grandpa through sound. So that's a nice introduction to this presentation. So I will share my presentation. Okay, so music. I call the music the Jew of Jewish studies, sort of a field, and the field of sound in general, that is usually only treated or addressed by those experts who are conversant in the technology of music, in the language of music, and it always looks like a little bit foreign to the mainstream of Jewish studies, what I call the logocentric focus of Jewish studies. Music is sound, and sound is immaterial by nature. However, sound could not exist or could not make any meaning without material bodies. First of all, the human body, who is the receptor of the sounds produced, and our brains that translate sounds into meaningful patterns that we call music. Therefore, there is a materiality in music by simple principle that it is realized through our bodies. But beyond our bodies, there are many material aspects of music that are characteristic of its transmission particularly in the modern era, but not only in the modern era. As a rule, even to this day, music is transmitted orally, and therefore we rely on memory and on the connection between bodies that are related to each other, a master and a disciple, a father and a son, a mother and a daughter, or vice versa. And this transmission that is the basis of the maintenance of memory of musical cultures remains to this very day a very strong component of most musical cultures in the Muslim countries, in the Islamic countries. And of course, also in many other cultures around the world. Now, the attempt to capture sound, to preserve it beyond oral memory, is what I will dedicate now a few minutes to show a few examples of how musical cultures of Jews and non-Jews were maintained via material culture in the Islamic age, in the lands of Islam. The first type of materials that we'd like to address are manuscripts of songs. In this case, what you see is a manuscript of Hebrew paraliturgical songs from the early 17th century by perhaps arguably, and here I am a little bit biased, one of the most important Jewish musicians in Islamic lands in the early modern period, Rabbi Israel Najara, who lived, was born in Safed in the Upper Galilee, but lived most of his life in Damascus and eventually became the rabbi of Gaza. And in his manuscripts, Rabbi Najara, who was also proficient in music performance and also in music theory, bequeathed us information about how the song has to be performed. And this is a nice example of the multicultural and multilinguistic spaces of the Ottoman Empire as its peak, the Arab lands of the Ottoman Empire. We have here the name of a maqam, the musical scale in which the song is composed, Maqam Buselik in this case. And we see here that he attributed his song, or he crafted his song according to a Judeo-Spanish melody. So we have a Turkish maqam, or Oriental musical scale, but a melody that was in the Najara family, who were immigrants from Spain. He was the grandson of immigrants from Spain, and the family kept this Spanish song in the repertoire. So the Spanish songs was in a way classified or codified as part of Turkish theoretical musical framework. All this we learn from this object, this manuscript that is in Cambridge. And to make the story even more interesting, he crafted his Hebrew poem according to the phonetics of the Spanish song. So in Spanish, con el vino, and in Hebrew, bentavinu. So you can see here the alliteration at work. So this type of musical transmission continued once the printing press revolution reached the Jewish populations of the Middle East too. Here you have a prayer book published in Venice in the year 1601. But the book was published on behalf of the Jews in the Ottoman Empire. Venice, at least from my perspective, was an integral part of the Ottoman network, Ottoman Jewish network. And here you see that There is a song included here, Bakasha, Naa, Lajan, en toda la Transmontaña. So you see here a beautiful song sang to the melody in Spanish of In toda la Transmontaña, which was a very famous Spanish song from the 15th century. So the transmission of manuscripts also relates to the transcription in the printing press. We can move forward into another example of printing music. I'm doing a big leap forward of 300 years to Algiers, 1905. And here we see a beautiful compendium, Diwan al-Aghani, Min Kalam al-Andalus, edited by Edmond Yafil. And here you see the repertoire of Algerian classical music, Andalusian music, but in Hebrew script, published on behalf of the Jewish performers of Andalusian music, which were very famous in Algeria, but did not or were not proficient in reading Arabic script. So Yafil published that in Judeo-Arabic, that is to say Arabic in Hebrew letters, in order to make the performances available. This is Natan Yafil. You can, following Professor Hussein's presentation, I could speak for an hour about why he looks like that, but we won't do that right now. But he was a key figure in the transmission of Andalusian music from Algeria, from its pre-modern into its contemporary settings. And here you see another work by Yafil. Yafil was already competent, being, of course, educated in Algeria under French colonial occupation, in the music notation of music in general. And here you see one of the earliest editions, printed editions of Arabic music in printed notation, Musique Arabe et More. You can see the title of this series of publications of scores. So we have manuscripts telling us something about the music. We have prints telling us something about the music. We have texts that are musically performed, and now we have a musical score that, of course, in order to be decoded, it needs the training, not only of the person who does the score, but the person who reads the score. So we are assuming here a conservatory education for Arab musicians, whether they're Muslims, Christians, or Jews. Here you see Yafil's with the orchestra in Paris. And here I introduce another element of materiality music, musical instruments. These are also objects that have their own technology, their own making. And here you see the Al-Mutrabia, the orchestra. You can see a field in the middle here with the musicians. By the way, there is a very interesting issue of gender relations in this picture. You have not only women and men together. Some men look like very religious men, but the women look like American women of the 1920s. So the picture also, once again, could be decoded on so many different levels. But musical instruments that you see here are partly related to the Arab traditions, but partly, of course, reflect the colonial influence in Algeria through France. And finally, we have the last technology that joins in the preservation of music, the recording industry. The recording industry arrived to the Middle East, to the Ottoman Empire, and also to Egypt in an amazingly fast after it developed in Europe. We have recordings from 1902 already from the Middle East, and here you have on your right side, recording by Sfinja, who was the teacher of Yafil, of Andalusian music. His teacher and his partner We have his voice from the very beginning of the 20th century. And then you have another recording of the great cantor of the synagogue in Oran, recorded by the gramophone company. And all these recordings offer us precious documentation regarding how music sounded in those areas and in those times. I also use in my research the printing press. And here you have the newspaper La Época from Saloniki, a very important newspaper with an aviso importante, a very important notice on the establishment of the Blumenthal company in Izmir, to sell phonographs and zonograph, to sell the records. If you want to buy records, the store is in this and that address. 1904, there is already a record store selling recordings. Here you have a very famous recording of the very early recordings of Izmir, a Cantica de Ajuar, a wedding song by the great cantor Isaac Al-Ghazi, one of the most renowned singers of the late Ottoman era and the early Republican era, both recording in Judeo-Spanish, in Hebrew, and in Turkish. And here you have Al-Ghazi's, once again, publication of Fasil, that is to say, a suite of Hebrew poetry set to Turkish music. And in this little booklet that was dedicated to the singers who perform these songs, he wrote down with musical notation the scale of the maqam. So here, once again, you have the same proficiency that Rabbi Israel Najara had 300 or 400 years ago, now present still in Turkey. Let's listen just a few sounds. You cannot speak about music without hearing something. The magnificent voice of Rabbi Al-Ghazi, just a few bars for you to know how this music sounded. I want to dedicate the last 2 minutes to another part of the Islamic age, just not to remain within the confines of North Africa or Turkey, and move to Baghdad, to one of the great musicians who is the object of my most recent research, Ezra Haron or Azuri Alawad Effendi. He had 2 names. He didn't change his name. He just lived his life parallel with these 2 names, depending on who was addressing him. And he also recorded in Baghdad. The recording industry came to Baghdad in the mid-1920s, a little bit later, but he was among the first artists to record in Baghdad. And here you have his composition recorded in Baghdad. Stylistically speaking, is between Ottoman and Arabic music, and the encounter at the beginning of the 20th century between both musical styles. Another type of material instruments that we have in our research are record catalogs. Here you see the Vitaphone catalog. Vitaphone, the most important Arab recording company in the Middle East, based in Lebanon and Berlin. And Azuri Alawad, as you can see, was one of the most important among the earliest recorded artists for this company. I cannot go now into, again, the analysis of this document, the multilinguistic aspect of it, the relations between imperial authority, technology, networks, cosmopolitanism. We can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A. And here you have, once again, musical instruments as symbolic object. Here you have the Iraqi delegation to the great and important Conference of Arabic Music, Cairo, 1932. The delegation of Iraq consisted of one of the most distinguished Muslim singers, Muhammad al-Kubanji, and all the musicians were Jews. And the ensemble mixes is an hybrid ensemble between Arabic instruments from the Mashriq, from Egypt, from the dominant music industry of the time, Qanun and Oud, and the instruments of traditional Iraqi music, which are more related to Persian instruments than to the Mashriq, to the Arabic Mashriq. And here you see 3-4 years after, the orchestra, the house orchestra of the Radio Baghdad, when it opened in 1936. All the musicians are Jewish, but now it's a totally modern ensemble. No more traditional Iraqi instruments, only Egyptian instruments, Qanun and Oud, and Western instruments, cello, violin, etc. The ney is the only traditional Iraqi instrument, the flute, that remains. We also have in our research program notes. The archive is rich in information that can be gleaned out from program notes. And finally, from the Azuri archive, we also have amazing musical notations. This is the music performed, composed by Azuri and composed on behalf of the Palestinian Broadcasting Service of the British Empire. They had an orchestra, an hybrid orchestra of Jews and Palestinians, and the music, you can see that in front of you. Francesco, I think I will stop here in order to allow a little bit more for a conversation.
We're going to use a few minutes just for one question. We have a couple of questions from the audience. A few we can answer in writing, but there is actually one that sort of I could even try to answer in my question to you both, Mustafa and Edwin. So first of all, thank you for your presentations, and thank you for sharing with us how you engage with material culture in the course of exhibition. We focus on that as curators of material culture. That's our main focus, but we also map it around in ways that are very similar to the one that you did with literature and music and photography and urban research and more. The question was actually, in a way, for Mustafa, but I think for all of us from one of our guests online, and what makes Ari, who was a Marxist, a Muslim, and anti-Zionist, an example of Jews in Egypt. In the introduction to our exhibition, Dr. Adamji and myself wrote that the echoes of the Jewish-Muslim encounters are in fact at the core of today's Jewish experience. They speak of human connections across divides, prompt reconsideration of assumptions that shape our public, cultural, and political debates, and map the precious possibilities and inherent fragility of coexistence, mutual appreciation, and belonging to many cultures at once. I think I would like to emphasize this last point of belonging to many cultures at once, because it's really something that I feel as a student of these topics is something I've really very much learned and embraced beyond my own cultures and my own many cultures, but like to understand what historical contexts are there. So you both in your presentations described very multi-layered and multi-directional cultural cakes If we were bakers, we would maybe be baking very layered cakes. And my question for both of you, it's one question, and maybe we start with Mustafa and with Edwin, but it's really about your approach, and especially how did you train beyond your own personal lives? You mentioned some of your backgrounds, but beyond your personal as academics, as scholars, in studying these very multifaceted world, multilingual, multicultural, and all that with all these cultures that exist at one. And also, where do you see this field going? In other words, how do you think you can train other students, also students who do not have your own personal background, in studying all of this? And I hope that your question will also answer some of the questions that are coming in online. So, Mustafa, would you like to take it first?
Absolutely, Francesco. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's like I teach a course here at the University of Michigan on Jews of the Middle East, and one of the earliest discussions we have in the class is identity. How do we understand identity? Is it just a one-dimensional thing that we can grasp and understand and study, or is it multi-dimensional entity that we have to take this into consideration as we study one's identity. If one is an Egyptian, Jewish, American, do we have to reduce all of this into just one signifier, or we are better off taking this into consideration as we are studying a specific individual or a group of or a culture? So most of I prefer to look at the identity discussion or the identity in general as something that is very, very complicated and that is dynamic, and sometimes it's like a reflection of one's experience and also a reflection of the community in which they live. And with regard to Ari, uh, because of his complicated figure, he is in fact a symbol of Egyptian Jews. Because as I said, I alluded to in my conversation or in my presentation, that it is not accurate to approach Egyptian Jews as one holistic community, either a Karaite in terms of like um, theology? Are there Karaite Jews or Rabbinic Jews? Are they Oriental Jews? Are they Western Jews? Are they originally from Sfarad, who settled in Egypt after they lived in Turkey for a while? So it's a bit complicated, and it's very rich, and its complication refers to its rich and its diversity that in a way is also a reflection of Egypt in general. So Ari is a reflection or a symbol of Egyptian Jews in terms of their cultural, religious, or maybe sub-religious, linguistic also diversity. When you go to one of my projects I did a few years ago, field work is to go to the Jewish cemeteries in Cairo and read the slabs. And what do they say about themselves? What do others say about them? And in what language? You get amazed to find that in some cemeteries, the slabs include engravements in Arabic that many non-Jewish Egyptians actually think that they are visiting a Muslim cemetery because the name of the deceased is in Arabic, and because the date is according to the Islamic calendar, and because sometimes there is like an Arabic poetic verse that commemorates the memory of the deceased, that made many people think that that deceased is a Muslim, not a Jew. But that takes us back to a culturally pluralistic, linguistic society in which these people lived, and that this diversity is widely celebrated by Albert Ari in his memoir, and also by those who um, attempt to revisit this past and think about their country differently. So it is very important then, given all of that, is to acquire several languages, not only, so monolingualism is antithetical to conducting a thorough and productive research when it comes to studying the history of Jews in the Muslim world. We just heard Professor Sarusi, speaking multiple languages in just like in 10 minutes. And also, everyone participating in this conference is very, very well versed in more than two languages, which in of itself also indicative of the diversity of the Jewish culture in the Islamic age, to also refer to Hodgson's term Islamic culture. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Professor Hussein. It sure did. Before I hand it over to Edwin Sarusi, there are a couple more questions for you that I think you can probably answer hopefully very quickly. But one is whether Ari's book is also available in English, and
No, the book is not available in
it's not.
English yet.
Eh,
I am in conversation with the family, and whether they will be interested in the future in
mhm,
translating this book into another
mhm.
language. Maybe they are
Yeah.
interested, but I think it's a good project. But if I were to translate it into English, I would reconstruct it because to
Yes.
me it goes chronologically,
Hmm.
and I think. A better structure would make it more engaging and more thought-provoking.
Thank you so much. And Edwin Sarusi, um, you you
Yes.
heard my questions at the beginning, but essentially
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
continuing this conversation. It seems like we're all
Yeah,
really dealing with very, very
I think
similar
Aria's
overlapping
memoir
issues.
should be translated first into Hebrew. That will be very
Yeah.
educational, I think.
Mhm.
Now, listen, Francesco, you know me very well. I am against two words in the classroom: identity and influence. So the first two words I tell to the students, if you mention these words, you're out. No, you're not out. But what I mean is that the issue of identity has led us into such a cul-de-sac intellectually that sometimes it loses its meaning, because we are talking about something that is processual. It's changing at every moment. What we ourselves were last year is not who we are this year. We are evolving all the time. And identity is not only how we define ourselves, also how others define ourselves, and who are those others. So this complexity leads into a conundrum that sometimes is more confusing to the students, as Professor Hussein has just explained very well. So the best way to circumvent the definition of identity is to teach about such a person as Albert Arié, just to teach how this person operated within the circumstances in which he was born, the place, the time, the issues that he has to face, the limitations that he had in his life. We are all, creatures of our circumstances. So the way we create our identity is sometimes a matter of negotiation, sometimes a very selfish type of decisions, not, I will say perhaps not selfish, but instrumental, the way we present ourselves. So my research on Ezra Aron, on Azuri Alawad, it's emblematic of this. I hope that the monograph will never attempt to define his identity, but will show how this musician was like a chameleon, changing all the time the language he speak, the way he presented himself to others, but basically is the same person in one body, just the identities are evolved. So I think I answered both of your questions. Also regarding the classroom, I think Professor Hussein mentioned the most important issue in our area is languages, and music is a language. So if you are studying music, you also have to learn several musical languages, whether this is Moroccan Andalusian music or Iraqi Makam or Turkish Fazil. So it's a mixture not only of linguistic languages, but also of musical languages. I can tell you that, and you have here in front of you the proof, all of my students are better than I am because they already had an infrastructure that they came in that I personally didn't have when I came into research. Particularly, if I can mention the whole issue of looking for music in Hebrew manuscripts was totally unknown at that time, or was unknown to a very limited amount by some of my teachers. The issue of the early discography at the time, it was totally rare, very hidden in archives, in personal archives. Today is like a paradise. We have a global network of people who are involved with these old recordings, so we can learn much more. So certainly we are advancing all the time on our understanding of the musical cultures of Jews in the Islamic age. And I hope the next generation will enlighten us even more than what we were able to. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Mustafa, for this really fascinating pair of presentations and for your remarks at the end. We're going to move on with our program, so we'll take a short break, a little stretch for everyone, and then we'll hand over the session to Professor Emily Gottreich and Nassim Benakoya from Turkey. So stay tuned. We're not going anywhere. We're just taking a short break. But thank you very, very much again. And thank you to those who asked questions in the Q&A. Keep them coming. Bye.
مسكلم يزيو كزوارا روكيا ومازدك يا ربي ككو خويم لولا عمر بيبا لا سيم بوتنا قد شالم مرحيم هذا يشتاق حومي ولو كترنا سرنا لم يفتح توفيق ولو شمنا ولو زكيفنا وريشا دينورا وباو سقيم بلا هبا يخيلا ليستكلا أدخيش دا أزانا شمالا قولا ذكرى بومار أورخ يومي ושלום יוסיפו לו. שמענו קולו אחריו, חיים שואל ממחר, נותנת לו אורך ימים עולם ועד, כל ההוא יומם לא אפסיק.
We are coming back after this short break. More questions are coming in, and I would like to invite Emily Gottreich and Nessim to be on video so that you can start your second session. Emily?
Great. Thank you so much, Francesco. What a pleasure to be here. I think we're off to a very good start. I think one of the great strengths of this exhibit that was co-curated by my colleagues Francesco and Qamar is that even as it brings to life these past histories, it also interrogates how we approach and understand them in the present, which shows how these histories are ongoing and that a nuanced intercommunal relationship between Jews and Muslims is not just a relic of the past, but continues to develop in line with 21st century imperatives, including in the Islamic world itself. So one area in which we see this happening, and which I myself am particularly interested in, is in the growing trend of Jewish heritage revival. And we see this in sites spanning from Tangier in the west to Tajikistan in the east, that in the last few decades alone have witnessed the restoration of dozens of ancient synagogues, hundreds of Jewish cemeteries, as well as the opening of several Jewish museums. I myself recently did research at two such institutions, the first in Dubai, the second in North Sulawesi, Indonesia, that were museums devoted not just to Jewish history, but specifically to Holocaust memory. The revival of Jewish heritage in the Islamic world today is a vast and frankly somewhat paradoxical trend that I think merits further investigation. Fortunately, we are honored to have at least one panelist with us today, joining us from Turkey, who can help us better understand this trend since his work lies at its very center. Again, since we have not been able to connect with our Moroccan panelist, we will just have Nessim Ben Koya give us a presentation, after which he and I will have a discussion, and hopefully the audience will chime in as well. Nessim Ben Koya is the general coordinator of the Izmir Jewish Heritage Project in Turkey. He himself is from Izmir. He went to Israel after high school and studied sociology and anthropology in Haifa, and eventually became the director of the Haifa Cinematheque, where he carried out film projects on intercultural dialogue in the Middle East. He's also among the founders of the Human Rights Films Project and the Arab-Jewish Young Cinema Cooperation Project. He's been the general coordinator of the Izmir Jewish Cultural Heritage Project since 2010, where he's responsible for the protection and preservation of movable and immovable cultural heritage. He also founded the Izmir Sephardic Culture Festival in 2017 and serves as its director. So Nessim, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us, and I look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you all for having invited me to this symposium. It's important for me. It's important to talk about this project. I will actually talk here about the story of an effort to preserve the Jewish heritage in Izmir, Turkey. But before we start, let me correct something. My last name is Benjoya. In Turkish, the C is a G, then therefore it's Joya and not Koya. After having settled this, let's see how we share the presentation. Let me see. Okay. Okay, it's coming. Do you see me? Do you see the presentation?
Yes, but you
Yeah,
might want to
good.
put it in slideshow.
Yep, that's
There
it.
we go. Perfect.
Okay, so our subject today is Izmir Jewish Heritage Project, a project that always had a part in the Izmir Jewish community's life, but since 2010, it has become more institutional, and the Izmir Jewish Community Foundation that was established took responsibility, and I am the general coordinator of this project since then. Now we know that the Jews in Turkey are mostly Sephardic, but not solely. Anyway, in Izmir, we're talking about generally about a Sephardic Jewish cultural heritage. As we might know, let me see how do I, okay, now. Okay, well, we all know this map that shows us the roads, the routes the Jews took after the expulsion from Spain and Portugal, and they come and settle in the Ottoman lands, included in today's Turkey, in Izmir, Salonika, Istanbul. They settle first in the surroundings of the city of Izmir that we see here, which is more or less in front of Athens and on the other side of the Aegean Sea. But first they settle on the surroundings, not in the city of Izmir itself, because the city of Izmir is a village actually, and it has no importance whatsoever in the national or international commerce. It's not an important port. By the end of the 16th century, it becomes a port, an international port, and it becomes the main port city of the Ottoman Empire, and the Jews come and settle inside in the center of this city. Okay, now what we see here is a part of the Izmir city center, a part of the Jewish old Jewish quarter where the Jews established their lives with the schools like Talmud Torah, Alliance School, cortijo houses. Cortijos are Jewish houses, mikvehs, synagogues, etc. Our project takes this bold area as its basis to preserve for one reason. There are 9 synagogues in this in this small area actually, and they date from the 17th century and on, with a lot of disasters that happened to them as well, but they were founded by the beginnings of the 17th century. The reason Jews settle here is the port. Now we see here an axe, an ark. You see this form of ark where it is written adjacent synagogues. So this was the old seashore inner bay of Izmir, providing a very safe port for vessels, and the customs and the storage places and all the facilities for the import and export of goods were taking place in this place. Therefore, we had a concentration of population in this area. Sorry. So we're gonna, from here, we're gonna start visiting the in your terms, materials, which are synagogues in Izmir, and how do we preserve them, what we want to do with them, and what is the situation today. Okay, So the first one will be the number 7, then we'll go to number 10, and then to the 8. We're leaving out the number 9, which was the chief rabbinate building. There are some law complications there, so we're not taking it into account right now. Bikur Cholim Synagogue, which means hospital synagogue, was established in 1724 by Salomon de Chaves, a Portuguese immigrant through Amsterdam, a wealthy person who builds this synagogue. And this synagogue gives us an idea about the very typical Sephardic synagogue, having the seating order along the walls, having the teva, which is the altar or bima, in the center, and we see the connection between this synagogue or this kind of synagogues to the past in Spain also. Recently discovered synagogues in Spain and Portugal, like Tomar and Utrera, I think the name, give us the same image, the same sitting order, the same location of the altar, so we can link these synagogues to the at least medieval era, and of course to the tabernacle where Moses received the law to his hands and he built the tabernacle. The principles are the same principles. From there, we go to the other synagogue. This is the Beit Hillel synagogue. This is its situation in 1992. It has collapsed after a fire, as you see. This is an important site for the Jewry of Izmir. It was the school, the yeshiva of the renowned Rabbi Chaim Palachi, who has until today followers all over the world who come to Izmir to commemorate his memory. And in 2013, we, with the help of the metropolitan municipality, to which we have gone and asked for participation, and they agreed. It was a small job. It's a very small synagogue. We have turned it into a kind of museum, a small museum in which you can see artifacts like these Torah scrolls, their mantle or their tik, shofar, rimonim that decorate the Torah scrolls, etc. And the entrance is free, so you can just knock on the door, come in, and get first-hand information about Jews, Judaism, Jewish history, etc., and rituals. Now, so we have the second synagogue preserved, actually, and keeping the memory of the Jewish history at the same place. In between, we have discovered some artifacts that are very interesting, like this. For example, we have a crescent here and a Star of David. So we never see a Star of David with a crescent because one is an Islamic expression and the other one is Jewish. So this, of course, needs research and see why this has become like that and how it was made. I mean, the logics behind them, but it's interesting. So are those rimonim with the crescents and the stars. So it's Jewish and Islamic symbolism together in a Jewish artifact. From there, we can, the distances are very, very small. We walk like 2 minutes and we're at the Portugal Synagogue. Portugal Synagogue is one of the early synagogues in Izmir. In 1630s, it was existing, and it was built by the Portuguese immigrants that came to Izmir. It is, I mean, this synagogue has been burnt in 1976. Yes, in Izmir we have a long story of burning places, including synagogues, etc. And nothing was left in it. Afterwards, we're going to see it. But the story about this synagogue is different, is much more important. When we go to the right, we hit the, we didn't go to the right. Okay, we see a building, okay? This building is a cortijo, was a cortijo. Cortijo is a Jewish house where many families live. It comes from Spanish, cortejo, cortijo in Ladino, and this is the house of Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi is the rabbi who was born in Izmir in 1626, and declared himself in 1648, I think, as the Messiah of Jews. And he was immediately excommunicated, because this is a challenge for everybody, especially for the religious authority as well. He in his theology, he had theological principles, social and some political arguments that were not accepted. After all, you don't accept a Messiah just like that. And he was excommunicated. He was excommunicated after a tour in all over the Middle East. He comes back in 1665 with a lot of, let's say, public relations, with a lot of followers. With it's incredible how in those times information traveled from Izmir or from Gaza, Safed or Jerusalem, to Vienna, to France, to Amsterdam, and he had followers even in those countries, I should say. He comes back, he breaks into this synagogue. This synagogue, he establishes there his kingdom, for a very shortly lived kingdom. And of course, this created a chaos in Izmir. He was called to the palace. He was offered two options, that or convert to Islam. He converts to Islam. The reasons of his conversion are discussed until today, but this creates a big disappointment within the Jews, and they don't believe him anymore. Not everybody, because there's a big group of followers of him that moved to Thessalonica afterwards. But he becomes a Muslim, but he's considered a fake Muslim. So actually, he is in a situation where nobody is with him. Okay. And the sad thing is that this continues until today. And this house is not even called Shabtai Tzvi's house today, because Muslims don't like him, Jews don't like him, and it's a subject that nobody touches. It's a taboo. Of course, our mission is to break this taboo, because if we're talking about preservation of heritage, this is also our heritage. Whether we like it or don't like it, it doesn't really matter. So this is one of the problems of, let's say, being in Turkey, between Muslim and Jewish beliefs and loyalties there, let's say. I'm going further. This was the situation of Portugal's synagogue in 2018. And we, since there was nothing in it, we turned it into a conference room. And in the middle of the old Jewish quarter, we have now a conference room, and conferences, symposiums are taking place in it. I'm going back to this picture to take you now from what was called the Chief Rabbi's Street to Bohor Levi Street. If you pay attention, these are Jewish names that were given formally, officially. After the Republic and Independence War, all those names were changed into numbers. So the identity, if you want, of these streets have been somewhere erased. Okay, we come to a street which is called Synagogues Street. This is officially, its official name is Synagogue Street due to the synagogues that we have around it, okay? In the 30s, there was an effort to change the name of this street to Turkish Bazaar, but it didn't work, you know, because people kept their heritage, both Turks and Jews. And the name remained as Synagogue Street. Okay, now we're gonna cross the Synagogue Street and we're gonna get into an area where there's a cluster of 6 synagogues. 4 of them are really wall to wall and 2 of them are 20 meters from each other. And we're gonna check what's going on with them. This is the synagogue's bazaar, synagogue street, okay, and this was the main commercial acts within the old Jewish quarter, but people from all over Izmir would come and find here fresh and cheap vegetables, fish, etc. You would hear the merchants screaming their merchandise in Ladino, Judeo-Espanol, in Armenian, in Turkish, in Arabic, etc., in Greek as well, but mainly in Ladino, because this was the Jewish quarter with all Jewish, and of course tabernas would be here very frequently. You would meet tabernas and also alcohol production factories like wine factories or arak factories like this one, for example. This is the entrance to the old wine factory owned by Khalifa Politi and later on by Nissim Politi. And since the 1820s, you can see here in 1900, the 1900, okay? It was an entrance was made to there. As you see, grapes and Hebrew date. From there, we enter a street, okay? Let's see if we can hear the voice. I wanted to make a check of sound, but we didn't make it. Let's see if you hear that. Do you hear that? No. Okay, so we're not gonna make it. Well, I hear it, but let me stop that. Okay. So what you would hear is a piyut, a Jewish religious hymn in the style of maftirim. A maftirim style is a style that has developed together with the dervishes of Turkey, Muslim dervishes, but Hebrew hymns are chanted in this style. Why? Because this is a synagogue. This is Etz Chaim, a Tree of Life synagogue. And from the windows, you hear that when you're into this street. On the other hand, you hear the call for the prayer of the mosque. Why you hear them? And they get intermingled because some of the prayer times intermingle, and you have on one side the cry, the call for prayer, the Muslim prayer. On the other hand, you have the Hebrew piyut, and you don't have to be. You can be atheist, but you get excited anyway. Okay, so this is today's situation after the restoration, And it was in 2018 like that. And we have conserved this place as such. And one thing really led us, one thought, we did not want to paint it in one color as it was before. Do you see at the bottom of the columns this blue color? Everything was in this color. What was done is that we scrapped the walls, we scrapped the columns, and we got to see different periods of time and different works in different periods of time. Like, for example, on this column, this is an imitation. This is not marble. This is the first period imitation, which is considered to be very artistic. And then on top of it, you have another period's imitation. And here on the bench, above the bench, you can see another period of marble imitation. So it was when we talk about identity. Our identity, like the building's identity, are layers, are based on layers. So as we peel the layers, we see parts of our identity, and we don't want to throw anything away. These are pieces of different embellishments on the walls according to different periods. This is the first period on the left. Then above it, you have these flower embellishments, and you have another period with other embellishments, traces of the 1841 fire, numbers of the seats, and inscriptions. So each one of them tell us different stories. The basement, which was a yeshiva, is now an art gallery in which we hold mostly multiculturally subjected exhibitions. And from the window of this synagogue, we see Hevra wa Talmud Torah synagogue, which collapsed, and above it we see the mosque from which we hear the Ezan. This was a very important synagogue. This was a situation in 2019. And what was done is that the rubble was removed. The walls were tied together. A temporary roof was put to protect the place. The restoration plan has been approved by the regional preservation committee, and we're now looking for funds to make the actual conservation. One question: do we have still time? Because we missed one person. I think I can go. Can I go on? Or yeah, okay. And in this synagogue, we also hold cultural events because we don't pray in it. And this is a commemoration to the Ashkenazi culture with a klezmer band, because Ashkenazi Jews have always lived in Israel, and they left us a heritage as well. And this is one of them, the music. Next to it, we have forasteros, the strangers, probably meaning the Livorno people, a synagogue that is in this situation. Here you see the temple roof of the previous synagogue. Through the windows, you see Al-Ghazi synagogue. So it's very interesting, this structure, and it's randomly, it's rarely met in the world. And this is what we have done there, a temporary roof, cleaning, strengthening the walls to prevent them from falling. And the conservation plan of the synagogue as well has been approved by the regional preservation committee, and we're looking for funds. So we're looking for funds for 2 synagogues to complete the picture. From here, in front of us, in between the palm trees, we see La Senora synagogue. And this wall to the right is the wall of Al-Ghazi synagogue. And those synagogues are separated by narrow passages, as you see, and a walk between them is really very exciting. This is La Senora synagogue. presenting a change, real change in the concept of the not only Jewish people in Izmir, but the whole spirit of the period, because although the original sitting order was along the walls like a typical Sephardic synagogue, and the altar was in the middle, we can still see the marks of it. It was moved to the eastern wall like that, and even the chairs have changed their positions, giving an impression of a school, a church, and this could be because by the time they did this, a big influence of French schools were introduced into Izmir, and at the same time, the Ottoman Empire started steps of modernization, westernization. So we guess that we suppose that it all influenced the architecture of the synagogues as well. What we do there, we don't pray in this synagogue, but we hold cultural events. And then we come to Shalom Synagogue, also one of the first active synagogue like Bikur Cholim, and the only synagogue that wasn't damaged in 1841, so we consider it the most authentic one. It has its story related to Shabtai Tzvi as well, because his teachers were the rabbis of the synagogue, Yosef Eskapa and Yitzchak de Alba, who taught him Kabbalah, who taught him religion, and they also excommunicated him, and Yosef Eskapa signed a decree for his death, but it was never realized. Al-Ghazi Synagogue, you don't know why I say, I don't know, but this is also a synagogue that has the altar in the center, a classic one, and it was built by the Al-Ghazi family, a very prominent rabbis and musicians family. Edwin Sarusin mentioned Ishaq Al-Ghazi from Izmir, and he was the latest rabbi in Hazan. And I am very sorry that I won't be able to make you hear the sound here, but this is in the same synagogue, a commemoration of Ishaq Al-Ghazi and his teacher and fellow musician, the Imam Rakim El-Kutlo, with whom he made music. Okay, and the musicians here are the Turkish radio, television, classical Turkish music musicians. This is a Beit Israel synagogue, the biggest synagogue and the newest synagogue in Izmir. 500 people can come into it, and this is a wedding, but this is a representative wedding in the Sephardic Culture Festival. The bride was already married, and she came with 2 kids she had, and she was very happy to get him remarried. And everybody is a volunteer here. But I put this picture just to have an impression of this synagogue. It's not in the old Jewish quarter. It's in the new Jewish quarter that was established by the end of 19th century. Where we can see this, the only synagogue that, according to the principles, has menorah next to the Echad, to the Ark of the Covenant. But here we have again a crescent and a star, but this is a crescent and a star of the Turkish Republic. Here the question is whether it's Islam or not Islam. And ketubah. Still, we have a ketubah. We have many ketubahs that have this symbol of Islam. We're working about a rabbinical library that has 1,700 old books, of which we have restored already the ones that were printed in Izmir between 1650 and 1750. These are classified, documented, and together with in a collaboration with the National Museum of Israel, we're developing a project. This is a collection of ritual textiles. You can enter the website that you will see the address at the end and download the catalog we have made. And we come back to the area to the end of this presentation, where I want to say that our objective is not to build a museum, a building with museum and artifacts inside. Our objective is to develop the whole area as an open-air museum, and having these synagogues, each one of them a different section, and the roads, the streets would be the corridors, because they also carry the memory of the Jewish history here. And we are going on working for that. And I thank you very much for giving me the chance to present. I know that I took double time than what you taking advantage of the absence of the other speaker.
Yeah, that's quite all right.
Thank you.
That's exactly what we wanted you to do. Nissim, thank you so much. What a just fascinating presentation. And I'm sure I'm not alone in saying I can't wait to come visit Izmir and see some of these sites in person. We have some questions, and I think what I'm going to do is try and combine questions from the audience with sort of my own questions.
Okay.
One of them has to do with the idea of audience, for who is the question from the audience, from our audience here is, well, who is coming to these concerts, these reconstructed weddings? But then I want to broaden that same question and take into account something you said at the very end, that these are not kind of closed museums, paying tribute to a culture that was, but is something about today and is open to the world around it. So who is that world? Who is that audience? Who do you hope to attract? Who is coming? What are regular Turkish Muslim people from Izmir thinking about these projects? Are they coming? How much are tourists involved, and so on?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, actually, it has, I think, to my thought, two dimensions. I mean, the question is for whom you do what you do. And first of all, personally, I do it for myself, okay? But as a representative of the community, Jewish community of Izmir, okay? It is for the Izmir Jewish community. But the Jewish community actually knows more or less what's there. It's not for that. There is a need of feeling pride, feeling appreciated by yourself. I mean, appreciation in what I'm doing. I mean, there's a need to that. Why? Because Sephardic Jews, Turkish Jews, for a long time have, in their words, enjoyed the tolerance of the Ottoman Empire, the tolerance of the Turkish Republic. Even when you say tolerance, right, actually you put yourself in an inferior place, because tolerance needs somebody that tolerates and somebody that is tolerated. And the thought is that we don't want to be tolerated, we want to be respected. So what we are doing for the Jewish community, when it is getting known by the larger society, produces a sense of pride, a sense of, look, we have done this and this and this, because it's not only about the synagogues, it's full of print houses, and it's full of schools, and it's full of commerces. I mean, establishments of commercial establishments that contributed to the development of the Izmir port city, etc. So to adopt this feeling of that you are an important community in Izmir, okay? That's self-appreciation, the other one is to to let the others, not Jews, know what is your life like, what are your traditions, what do you believe in, how do you celebrate Shabbat, even if you were not religious, okay? So people know about you. Therefore, if people who come to visit, a lot of non-Jews come to visit the synagogues, for example, the Jewish heritage sites. And there is a festival, Izmir Sephardic Cultural Festival, that we didn't talk about, but it's a part of this effort. And it was established in 2018. And most of the visitors are Muslim Turks. Also Christian Turks, but there are so few Christian Turks that we talk about Muslim, because the 99.9% of the country is Muslim. And they come, and they are curious. And we are very happy to present our music, our language, our traditions, our food, gastronomy. And this gives the community a sense of pride and self-appreciation, which, to my opinion, they didn't have, because we have a saying, a word, callades. Callades in Ladino is silencio in Spanish, silence. So don't really show yourself too much, because you can get hurt. Okay, this was the basic philosophy based on the past experiences, but today we want to change, and people do accept it. I talk too much. I think it's understood.
Sure. No, just enough. And please, there are a lot of people asking for the website of the project, and including something
Yeah.
to help. So we can do that after. But
okay.
We will make sure that is put in the chat. There are many questions coming in about the physical structures themselves, including several about whether you have a mechitza, a separation between men and women, which leads me to ask a larger question of are you changing the structure in any way? Are you trying to recreate what was, or are you renewing it for modern use? Or what are the models you're using for the physical space?
Yeah. Okay. Now we're against reconstruction. Okay. We did it once, and we don't want to do it anymore. We are for conservation, as you have seen in this Etz Chaim synagogue, and the rest will be done in the same way, conserving this different, I mean, the layers of its history, you know. And about mechitza, which we call Azrat Nashim, which is the women's gallery. It exists in every synagogue except one. We don't know why, but except one. It exists, but they are not used today in the old Jewish quarter. But it's very paradoxical, you know. History doesn't go in a linear way, because there's the newest synagogue in the newest quarter of Izmir. A modern synagogue was built, because everybody lives there, and it's very modern. When you do something modern that looks like in Manhattan, not in Izmir of Turkey, okay, with the traditional Ottoman, etc. It's the same. It's like saying, okay, we do something new, we don't look back. Okay, these motifs are not for us. We're modern. But at the same time, there's a women's gallery, and the policy regarding the women's gallery is very strict, even stricter than before. Funny, but it is like that. Do you hear me?
Yes, of course. Great. Time for one last question that might get us into a slightly sensitive area, but I think it's worth asking. One of the members of the audience asked something about relations between Jews and Armenians and Christians historically in 1922 with the population exchanges. Again, I want to take that question and ask you more broadly. Does the promotion of Jewish heritage in Turkey from the point of view of, let's say, the Turkish government, not the Jewish community itself, which I think you explained very well, the motives there. Is there a possibility that the government itself derives some advantage, some kind of credibility as supporting minorities in
Yeah.
general, especially vis-a-vis other minorities that maybe it's not supporting their heritage as much. And I'll just leave it at that because, of course, I'm talking about Armenian heritage sites principally, but other ones as well. So from the point of view of the Turkish government and its treatment of minority sites, especially this Turkish government, how does Jewish heritage fit in?
Well, yeah, good question. Good question and complicated question. Now, for centuries, okay, Jews were friends of Ottoman Empire because Ottoman Empire was fighting Christian world, you know, Europe, and Jews were expelled from there. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Logic. And it went into, yes, I mean, the Jewish community in a way was used as a card because there is a strong Jewish lobby in the United States. And how do we get there? It's a good case, you know, in a Muslim country that Jews are well treated to show that, yes, of course, there is such a use. Of course, there is such a use. I don't know who believes it anymore, but if there is such a use. And of course, Jews enjoyed this protection. Jews enjoyed this protection because not everything was so smooth, although not, I mean, Jews in Ottoman Empire or in the Republic did not live a Holocaust or nothing near it. But yes, there were pogroms. Yes, there were firing Jews from a lot of places because a new nation was to be built, or the assets tax. I don't know how you call it in 42, in the middle of the Second World War. Suddenly, Jews and Armenians and Greeks, I mean, all non-Muslims were taxed heavily, very heavily, and those who couldn't pay were sent to kind of concentration camps, not killing them, but making them work hard for 2 years. And following the intervention of the, I think, United States, they were liberated. Now, but the disaster that hit the Armenian people is, of course, different. And I think that here, again, I mean, you cannot find a Jewish person that will say, yeah, that what was done is okay, or nothing like that was done, nothing like that, because the Jews have this sensitivity of they know what happened. But politically speaking, in order to get this protection, this closeness with the government, they have given in and they have aligned with the government. Yeah, of course, politically. So that the Jewish lobby in United States, yeah.
Good. Yes, I know it's a complicated subject
Yeah,
that
yeah,
leads us in all different areas, but I think it's worth going into. Well, I do believe we're out of time. Nissim, it was an absolute honor to
yeah.
have you with us. Congratulations on this project, which is monumental in every sense of the word. And I hope you and I can continue our talking
Yeah,
about it. Okay.
please do it.
Thank you
Let's
so
do
much,
it.
and
Okay,
thank you for
thanks
all
a
the
lot.
questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all the
Bye,
questions. We'll
bye,
take now
bye.
a quick break, and we'll come back with our third panel shortly. Thank you so much.
ومسكلم يزيو كزوارا روكيا ومزدك يا ربي ككوخويم لولا ولو شمنا ولو زكيفنا وريشا دينورا وباو سقيم ولا هبا يخلا ليستكلا أدخي ازدعزنا شمالا قالا ذكرى بومر أورخ يوميم وشنود حيم بشغلا يوسف لا شمالا قالا أحرام خيم شوال بسعو حروني كل هو يومو نسينا على الأرض قوينا بوتر دازل شو حمينا لبوسنا قريشا قدش حقنا شيم ديستعلق من الرأي شورت مرگیر مملو خود کما پیترین بیرکیا
Okay, welcome back. Whoops, there we go.
Hello, Emily.
Hello.
And
We are just going to move right on to our third panel, and thank you to the audience who stayed with us so far. I hope many of you have had the opportunity to actually see the exhibit on which this whole webinar is based, which is about Jewish material cultures in the Muslim world. It's an exhibit called In Plain Sight, Jewish Art and Lives in the Muslim World. And it was co-curated by my colleagues, Francesco Spagnolo and Qamar Adamji. And it's really an incredible labor of love, really. It's expansive, it's deep. It required tremendous knowledge and effort to bring it together. So this last panel is going to kind of explore that process and the process of creating an exhibit like this, what went into it, how it proceeded, and so on. So I'm asking our co-curators to start just by presenting a slideshow they developed, so you can see some of the actual objects, which are quite amazing, and talk a little bit about the themes, and then we'll go into a deeper discussion. And once again, your questions are absolutely welcome and invited in the Q&A section. Okay, please take it away.
Thank you, Emily. Good to see you again on video, Kamal. And I'll also go into the ritual of sharing my screen, so hopefully it works. Let me see. Do this. So, as Emily was saying, our exhibition is titled "In Plain Sight: Jewish Arts and Lives in the Muslim World," and the idea behind this exhibition came from me running a series of surveys of the holdings of the Magnus collection. Just as a reminder, the Magnus collection is one of the largest Jewish museum collections in the world. It's part of UC Berkeley, so an important research university. And we conceived this exhibition, like all other exhibition projects, with these ideas in mind. So it was mining the collection, and at some point working with some students, compiling a very large and wide checklist of objects that had provenance in the Muslim world. They were all part of the permanent collection of the Magnus, and came up with a total of about 1,400 items. And 1,400 items divided from, and you'll see a few of these as we present some images, and you saw some of these in the beautiful slideshow that our colleagues, my next colleagues, prepared for this symposium. It ranges, the materials range from textiles to objects of everyday life, to manuscripts, photographs, postcards, paintings. There's a little bit of everything, so a way to kind of document culture at large. And 1,400 objects means a lot of research, and especially beginning with the question, how is it that all these materials came to Berkeley, California? They all belong to Jewish communities around the Muslim world. We can document it from the Middle East to North Africa, and of course even mapping the presence of Jews in the Muslim world through objects imposed us to think about all sorts of maps and possible maps and multi-layered maps and so on. And I had met my wonderful colleague Kamer in San Francisco at the Asian Art Museum, and after a few conversations, it seemed clear to me that we could try a partnership. I see you're smiling, Kamer. So, and
worked out nicely.
I think our secret, sometimes creative secrets are in we deal with material culture. So I think one of our secrets is we both love spicy food. So we had good spicy meals and had a chance to think about things together. And in presenting this exhibition, what we did is that we actually worked together. A pandemic happened, so we then worked together remotely, etc., but also always with UC Berkeley students, which meant that we had to kind of explain to ourselves and to others at every step what we were trying to do. So I remember I would run some of these sessions together and thinking about, okay, are we looking at sharing of cultures? Earlier, we talked about sort of this multi-layered culture and belonging to many cultures at once, but are we talking about cultures that are shared? Are we talking about affinities, cultural affinities? What were coexist and what are these terms? And so we kept going at it, and eventually we came up with this expression of mutually meaningful. Mutually meaningful means that something is meaningful to me, and I am somewhat aware of what it means to me. And I know that it's also meaningful to you. And you presumably know why and how it's meaningful to you. But we're also mutually aware of the fact that these meanings have something to do with our relationship. So that was sort of how we crafted this whole project. And in our introduction, I'm going to pull up our words for just for a second. In our introduction, we also tried to, and this was actually very much Kamar's request when I explained to her this long-standing tradition of Jews studying, engaging with text, especially the Talmud, but any kind of text, which is by default sacred text, difficult or sometimes impossible, virtually impossible to interpret. And so to work in duos, in pairs, in couples of students and challenging each other, but also learning how to see the same text, in our case, the same object, with each other's eyes. So the exhibition we wrote represents a culmination of over 5 years of curatorial collaboration. As curators of Jewish and Islamic art, we examined objects together, studied primary sources ranging from visual culture to architecture and music, and read secondary literature in several languages, at times flanked by UC Berkeley students and scholars in various disciplines. We spent many hours in the fashion of the Talmudic Chavruta, the pair of students, two students with complementary, divergent, and contradicting views, training ourselves in the other's perspective, seeing the same object with the other's eyes, and forming day after day a shared perspective, a common sensibility. So, Kamar, you kindly offered to share with us how this shared or common sensibility worked. So here are some examples you prepared to kind of guide us into the process, and then we'll just give the audience a quick overview of the parts of the exhibition, how we articulated it, how we organized the objects. Again, as a reminder, we started with 1,400 objects and ended up with 60. So that's the work of the curator. Often it's the work of trying to make sense of large data sets and large parts of information and distill them in ways that can be held within a room, a series of rooms within space. Kamar, help us out.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesco, and all the colleagues at Magnus and Emily for amazing conversations, and to you all for being here. Francesco just touched on, some of the shared interests and our shared yet overlapping ways of thinking that reflects itself in this exhibition. And I'll just show you a few slides of objects from the collection and from that are on display that kind of speak to some of the conceptual challenges that we posed ourselves with and systematically worked through them, but also how these two different ways of disciplinary backgrounds and what and our the words that we knew came together. As one can imagine, in a topic of this type, there are a few kind of tropes that get bandied about. In the previous presentations between Mustafa's work, Edwin, and Nassim, some of those kind of words came up, and I think many people already recognize how problematic they can be. Identity, influence, borrowing. Those are things that keep coming up. And right there, when just that before I even say much about the slide, the question can come up: who is influencing whom? And that turns out as very quickly enough to be an inadequate way of thinking about things, because right there it assumes two or more parties with unequal power relationships of an influencer and an influencee. And so instead, thinking about the concept of mutually meaningful or of selective adaptation can be a more interesting and richer way of looking at these objects. So, for example, the Torah Ark curtain on the right, 18th century Turkish, when I was looking at this with Francesco and Julie, the collections manager in storage, the first thing I was like, oh, wait, this looks like a prayer rug from the Metz collection that I already knew quite well, which to the point where there's this kind of vase of flowers right underneath the lamp, hanging lamp, which struck my attention. And as you see that image there. And once you start unpacking those, you can think about all kinds of other associations of, the central feature in a mosque, which is the mihrab, which marks the direction towards Mecca, with across the Muslim world, and over time shown often as an empty, shallow niche, sometimes with a hanging lamp in front of it. Or one can go back even further to the synagogue in Dora Europos and see the regional use of the form. Or also, one could even go back further to Greco-Roman antecedents and whatnot. So what we had to keep also holding ourselves back on is to think about these not only in this broad sweep, Joseph Campbell type of, all is one and everything is universal, but rather to look at the specificities of time and place and local, regional use of motifs, so use of visual language, as well as to see not just the use of motifs and formalistic surface level affinities, but rather what we're seeing here is conceptual and deeply symbolic elements of the use of light, a reference to actual architectural spaces, which can, Francesco, can you advance one more? And, physical, this is just one example of a mosque prayer hall from Cairo, where you can see the references to physical spaces, their own layouts, and the role that they play within religious, congregational, liturgical, and devotional lives of their adherents. And next slide, please. In this, here's another example on the right is a ketubah from Iran, which, again, me coming with my Islamic studies and South Asian studies, art history background, I'm looking at it and it was like, oh yeah, this looks normal. Sure. And then I learn that wait, a codex form or a bound book format of a ketubah is not that common in the world of ketubahs. And again, but when I look at it, it looks like the frontispiece, the opening of a illustrated or not illustrated manuscript, typically that for poetic verses or perhaps for a prayer book or religious text that has this richly ornamented title headpiece, chapter headings or titles against gold background, and the rest, I mean, you can see for yourself these kind of obvious relationships between typologies of form, typologies of function, and which speaks to this shared belonging and shared cultural participation, in addition to one's other aspect of identity, which is religious or devotional. Next slide, please. The same thing kind of goes here with the ketubah on the right and architectural wall tile. Um, I've in my previous work, I have been looking at illustrated manuscripts made in India, but that were written in local dialect, and questions of Hindu artists working on Muslim manuscripts, and these kind of religiously defined divides sometimes override the shared cultural affinities. And one question that keeps coming up in those contexts is, oh, but how would a Hindu artist know how to paint in Persian style? Or what would a Muslim artist know about the Hindu gods, Shiva or Vishnu or whoever? One could perhaps say the same kind of thing for these, but the pairing here kind of reminds us that culture is visible in all kinds of forms and places, and it's not restricted to a place of worship or to one's individual faith traditions. And so when we kind of just see this arrangement of architectural lobes and niches on the ketubah, and with a border and decorative frame ornament within the spandrels of the tile and or within the ketubah, there is this kind of shifting of gaze, shifting of metaphor, shifting of visual language, which makes both things equally legible to those who use or see these objects. Next slide, please. And this was something that I found quite fun and actually also quite interesting, which was, again, we're looking at the same Persian ketubah with the detail on the upper right. Again, I see it, and I see or saw Shira Khurshid, the Persian imperial insignia, particularly enforced or that became the emblem of the Persian Qajar dynasty in the 19th century, and then it's like, oh no, but of course it's the line of Judah. And so when this, just to unpack this one particular motif of this polysemous imagery, what we're seeing here is this interesting way in which religion, science, economics and currency, as well as imperial imagery, all come together in these multiple layers of that many-layered cake. And so, and yet it is a very distinctively Iranian thing, as opposed to not, you know, you don't see the Shira Khurshid in quite the same way in India. It doesn't have a place. I'm not quite sure of what happens in the Arab world with the lion, but on the left are representations of Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law, Ali, the first Imam of the Shia faith, which is the dominant faith practice of Muslim Iran. Ali has been known as the Lion of God, Shira Khuda, from 8th, 9th century onwards. And you often find not only images of Ali with his family, with the lion, to kind of remind that. One could also think of St. Jerome here, but also very often this calligram at the bottom left, which is the prayer of Nade Ali. Oh, I call to Ali to help me break down my problems. It goes on. The whole Nade Ali's first opening lines are in the form of a lion. But starting also from the 10th century, what you're seeing up here is a 19th century copy of a 10th century Persian text on constellations, and it is the Book of Fixed Stars, where the constellation of Leo is shown as this lion, and on the lion's body are the stars. The 9th, 10th century versions of the lion look slightly differently than this one, who now has its raised forepaw and this proud tail, which looks very much like not that which you start to see from the 19th century onwards, with the two images on your right with the imperial Persian symbol. But right below it is this image of the lion as a constellation of Leo. So it's all of these things that kind of come in and out and play with each other to make that motif on the ketubah a really more potent symbol. Next slide, please. I can, here is another angle on this kind of multilingual aspect of decoration, of imagery, of technique, of workmanship. And what we're seeing on this slide are two works. The one on the right is a detail from Candlestick, which is in the exhibition, and the one on the left, which is in a private collection. Inlaid metalwork from Damascus in the 1920s. And all the way at the left is a 13th century inlaid metalwork bowl from the Mamluk period, and northern Syria, Egypt, and Iraq from the 13th to the 15th century was best known for its inlaid metalwork. But it's in the 1920s where there are treatises that talk about the sad state of crafts in Damascus by the turn of the century, modernization in the preceding decades, changing tastes, and rising costs, loss of patronage in the old ways, had caused a dwindling of the craft trade. But in Damascus, in the section on this particular survey of crafts, it is the metalsmiths of Damascus who are very highly praised, and they are the Jewish metalworkers. But it is also at this time, around a few decades prior, where with the emergence of modernity, very broadly speaking, royal private collections become public view, and artists and craftsmen of all kinds are going to see these, and there's a revival of these 14th Mamluk and Ayyubid period crafts, which here you can see on the right with Hebrew inscriptions and on the left with Arabic inscriptions. So craftsmen making these for different audiences, who are also using them for different functions, but also within a shared culture. Last slide, please. And I'll end with this, the talit bag with the prayer shawl bag made for as a present. And we see the stars and the circles and the geometric patterning, and again, imagery resonant for within the Jewish context. But also on the left is another reminder of this drawing and a maquette which speaks to the early 20th century moment of westernized education that is coming in through formal and informal colonial relationships, where there is a desire within internal, local reformers, social political reformers who want to be more modern, as ways of how do you take the past and make it fresh for a new audience, for today's world. And we see this, and in the exhibition on the, if you happen, there are, sorry, I don't have the image here, but the teflin bags for phylacteries have very much the same shape as this embroidered velvet wallet that was designed as a collaboration. This is not Moroccan and Tunisian, but the Fabrique École de Tunis and the École des Beaux-Arts of Paris, working to take old crafts and make them new and give them revived life. And this revived life also becomes the bread and butter for these emergent economies because of the tourist traffic from North America and Europe that are making the rounds of the Holy Lands and who are making the rounds of the Middle East and taking back souvenirs with them. So with that, I turn it back over to Francesco and
Yes,
take it from
thank you,
there.
Kamar, for again outlining. And this was even just some of the layers we discussed over the years,
Yeah.
and over time, and rediscussed and rediscovered and reconsidered. We organized the exhibition according to 5 themes, and articulated these 5 themes around the 6th theme, the theme of light. So we imagine a Hamsa as the structure for our project and put light at the center. At the center, we put, a Torah archon that Kamar discussed earlier that symbolizes light very much at the center of the synagogue, but also this lamp, which is part of the, in a way, of the last wave of Kamar's presentation about tourism, and most likely made for to be bought by tourists that could guess Hebrew, guess Arabic, but this is a lampshade, most likely for the tourist market, that includes quotations in Hebrew from the Bible, and then the footprint of the Prophet Muhammad, and then in Arabic inscriptions of the attributes of the Prophet. And we placed this lampshade at the center of our gallery, and so that our audience, our public, would come and be kind of bathed into the shade projected through to this lamp. This kind of like to explain in very practical terms that when we deal with material culture, with the objects of our day-to-day life, we deal with an embodied experience of culture. And so we wanted to move in that direction. We explored, and here are more lamps, and we also, with archival photography, illustrated how lamps are very much a part of the an essential fixture of the world of the synagogue, and but their symbolism is incredible in so many ways, and Kamar helped us decrypt some of it in our presentation. We discussed in our exhibition this concept of belonging in place. Essentially, in one of the things that came to surface in working on this exhibition was the fact that there are many ideas of diaspora out there, and many competing ones at this point, but they all seem to have something to do with uprootedness, with separation, and with dissemination. And not also with the fact that with dissemination comes the belonging in place, that the diaspora is also a concept that has a lot to do with rootedness, and a lot of the objects that we were dealing with kind of bring both aspects together. What we're looking at is actually the work of an Iranian Jewish artist who was active in Tehran until the revolution in the 1970s, and never worked as an artist after immigrate to America. So this was a gift from the artist to the Magnus collection, but it also depicts a Seder plate that depicts a Seder, a Passover Seder scene in which everybody's seated, eating, presumably from a plate, or from plates similar to the one that is the object of our display, which is actually rather large, and it's a party plate. It's a Seder plate for a large group of people eating communally. We included in our exhibition some excerpts. So here you can sort of see a direct one, basically on how people eat, and we used in this case the travelogue was a Hebrew travelogue from the late 18th century by Shmuel Romanelli, who was European, born in what is now northern Italy, but wrote in Hebrew and spent 3 years in Morocco and wrote extensive annotations, commentaries, documenting his trip there and really describing material culture, the everyday life. And so we integrated our display also with quotations from this travelogue and hear about how people eat together communally. Nessim was talking about the fact that stars and Jewish stars and Muslim stars and crescents and are rarely combined. We actually found them combined in various objects. The one on the left is from Turkey, actually, and I think the date is wrong, but it was 1898, not 1988. And this is a beautiful photograph of the entrance of the Karaite synagogue in Cairo by San Francisco photographer Aaron Winsky that on purpose brings these different symbols together. I have to say, in my learning of sharing shapes with Kamar, I've also learned the importance of cypress trees, and of course also of hamsas. We kind of started from there. Everybody will start from there, but also various types of stars, both six-pointed stars that are typical of Jewish tradition, eight-pointed stars that have a typographical role in the organizing of the page of Muslim sacred text and the Quran. So when we see an eight-pointed star, we kind of implicitly think about a reference to scripture, to sacred text, and the fact that oftentimes objects embody sacred texts, and then they're like the texts are almost painted on them, and then the surface of objects can be used to really reflect these various layers of culture. So you see here 6 and 8 pointed stars in various permutations and all kinds of other symbols around the Hamsa, around the Hanukkah lamp, and so on. Here's the cypress trees. Cypress trees are, in my knowledge of Jewish visual culture, are typically connected with the city of Jerusalem. It's very rare to see a depiction of the city of Jerusalem without cypress trees. And Kamar immediately pointed me to Iranian sources or Austrian sources and sort of the idea of the cypress tree as a symbol of a conduit, of a place that is a conduit between heaven and earth. Jerusalem is one of them, and it's not the only one. And so we actually explore cypress trees in all sorts of contexts. So this is a little anthology of cypress trees from the objects in the exhibition. There could have been many, many, many more, and they come from Syria, from Iran, from Tunisia, from Jerusalem, from really it's a pan diasporic Jewish Muslim theme that we encountered in material culture, but that gave us a lot to think about, not just material culture, but about spiritual culture as well. We devoted a whole exhibition. I was talking just now about how objects can be used to paint text. They can also use to paint architecture. The palace, the Dar Margan in Fez, is a palace that Maimonides supposedly lived in. But if you see the motif of the horseshoe art that's on the building, on the facade of the building, you find it in a ketubah, in a marriage contract from Morocco, but also on a Hanukkah lamp. So manuscripts and objects are also buildings in a way, and these buildings also have symbolic power, and especially the building as a palace and as a residence of the divine on earth. So all of these dimensions seem to coexist, and we've been spending all of our curatorial time together trying to bring them forth and then to kind of refine them in the way we presented it in the exhibition. Kamar, this was a section of the exhibition that very much came out of your own research, so I'm letting you go ahead in explaining or like guiding us through the last sections of the exhibition, but one had to do with texts and bodies and how they're treated.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, at the time when I was working on this with the Magnus, I was also trying to develop an exhibition for the Asian Art Museum on the Quran, and where the Quran is as a living thing, not just a separate textual source, which when we started to talk about this body of materials, that idea of the word and its centrality in both traditions, but also the engagement of the word with one's body or body writ large, whether as a institution of or community of faithfuls, or one can keep expanding on it. So hence came this idea of the text being the ways in which it's internalized by being recited, memorized, read, and therefore imprinted on the body and on the mind. And with all of these objects that are used as coverings, whether for the Torah ark or for amulets and other types of bodily, sometimes even garments that have references or verses on it to protect. So on these are the word as protection with references in the form of motifs that speak to abundance, to beauty, to adornment, and all of these together come feature on these objects, of which two are here as examples. Next, please.
And last but not least, Kamar, you already guided us through the whole idea of the revival of the Mamluk period in the modern era. But if you want to say something about this camel-shaped lamp, which we find in other collections and out there, with the top is a screw-on top, so it can be changed easily from having a six-pointed star to having a crescent or another symbol, depending on who the tourist buyer might be at that time in the market. But if you want to just share one last comment about this lamp, and then I think we have a little time for questions and
yes, I mean, again,
reflections.
That aspect of Orientalism and exoticizing comes in very much over here. This lamp,
I remember you did not want
delightful
to include
mixed
it in the
feelings about it.
exhibition.
No, I did not want it in the exhibition. I thought it was rather a difficult object for me visually. And the more I started to think about it, the more I grew to really, really enjoy it, because it really speaks to the self, the other, the many others, as well as ways of making memory in the form of souvenirs. You go someplace, you buy something, you bring it back, and it reminds you of that fabulous place you went to, and that I don't know, I still have problems with those beaded hangings, but it just makes me think of all those 19th century Orientalist tropes of dancing harem, harem scenes and whatnot. But nonetheless, it's really speaks to its moment and to the versatility of its craftsmen, and taking upon the past and bringing it into the present. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I will stop the presentation, and here we are. Emily.
Sure. Hi. Wow. I'm just I've seen the exhibit so many times that I'm still in awe every single time. Simple question. How did you go from, what was it, 1,400 objects to 60? Let me also emphasize again that those 1,400 objects were not curated from somewhere else. These are in the collection of the Magnus. But how did you whittle it down? What did you do? What was your criteria?
I think if I can begin and answer, Kamar, then please.
Yeah.
But I think that's also often the work of a curator. When we work with sometimes large bodies of objects or materials, and we kind of think about how to pare them down. From my experience, the process is always both complex and fraught and full of questions and self-doubting. And having students with us kind of brought forth that aspect, because students were kind of, how can we do this? How can we reduce this? What I did in the preliminary work before Kamar became more involved in this was to actually dream up various taxonomy with students, and trying to group objects and think about how these objects could be grouped and according to what categories: materials, colors, shapes, and so on and so forth. Of course, provenance, etc. Just to kind of dominate a structure of 14 or more hundred objects. But Kamar, if you want to talk more about the curatorial part of this.
Yeah, it is indeed that uh, at least for myself, I go first by look. I mean, we are going to be in an exhibition where we have people who are coming in to into a space where the objects need to speak in and of themselves. In an exhibition, one typically has, I mean, the Magnus was a little generous with but every, typically you have 75 words that you can use on a label to talk about the artwork. And at the Asian, at even here at the Met, your big text panels, the main entry one is 200 words, 250 tops, and the shorter ones for each section are significantly shorter. So now when you're trying to talk about your point of view to an audience who's coming in from, you don't even know what their entry points are. It's unlike a classroom where you take everybody with you. Uh, and and so the visuality of the object needs to make sense and to be eye-catching. So that was one key criterion. Then it had to relate to other things around it with enough familiarity that you can build into the appearance so that after a viewer looks at one example of whatever, an arch, next time you see it, you recognize it, and then you can probably go someplace else with it and notice something else. So to balance the familiar without becoming monotonous and is without being able to dismiss it. Oh yeah, I saw an arch there. Okay, fine. I don't need to look at this. I'll move on. Along with some new ideas, new elements so that it brings you back again. So managing this repetition of familiar, unfamiliar, old and new, and novelty that can also take a person through the pathway that you have, your ideal pathway, because you can't control what people look at and how they move in a space. And yet people in exhibitions typically come in, open that book on chapter 3, read line 1 of paragraph 25, and then tell you, oh, but I don't get what you're talking about. This makes no sense.
Mhm.
Like, yeah.
So if I can add just one more thing about this, which is that I think in terms of, it was two of us making these selections, and I felt that the process was incredibly smooth,
Yeah.
but I think it was smooth both because I guess we had met beforehand. It was a choice to work together, so we knew we had certain affinities that were compatible. But also because we did spend a lot of time just talking, going through objects, thinking, rethinking, etc., so that eventually the final selections were sort of natural in their
Yeah.
own right. There was very little second thought by the time we were at the point of production.
Yeah.
I should also
But I
mention
also,
that
oh, sorry.
we've had also great colleagues, in particular Julie Franklin, that Kamar mentioned earlier, the registrar of the Magnus, David Sullivan, the preparator, and Carol Jung, the designer, who really helped us kind of keep the process going. Yes, you were saying, Kamar.
No, but so on that note of, you just mentioned Carol and the design process, that's another moment when you realize that, oh, wait, you need to rethink. And I remember we cut down the object list from whatever, 100 and something down to 60 or 70 or close to 100 to further down, because you start to map things out into that physical gallery space. And it's like, oh, it's gotten really squeezed here, or this doesn't fit. So then how do you go through another round? Yeah.
Well, you did a tremendous job. Absolutely. It's quite amazing. I think we have time for one last question. I'll ask a sort of poignant question, which is, has to do with the vagaries of history, and that when we're talking about Jews in the Islamic world, we're talking about a sort of present absence or an absent presence. In the sense that they're no longer physically there, is certainly not in the numbers that they once were. Some communities like Iran, like Turkey, like Morocco, still have functional Jewish communities, But even those are a mere shadow of what they once were. And then in other places, you have virtually no Jews left. Yet there's a symbolic currency to, perhaps the idea of the Jew in these places in the Islamic world today, certainly, and with these exhibits. So I wonder to what extent did that, I mean, did you have to at any point deal with that, with what appears to be the end of these communities, or at least the diminishment of these communities? Was that hanging over this exhibit in any sense? How did you deal with that? That sense of present absence?
Kamal, would you like to go
I
first?
was going to say, why don't you take it? Because I come, no, the reason why I say that is because I come to this material primarily as an art historian, and not from, I was not even thinking about all of these questions that you asked until I got further along into this project. This was not my, I mean, my, in my sphere of consideration. It was, unfortunately, I regret to say that now. I mean, regret to say that, but I feel like I can say it now because that is part of the learning process. And that is indeed the type of outcome we would hope for projects like this, whereby you expand your own frame of thinking. So, therefore, back to you, Francesco.
Well, I think, the years that preceded this project were also years of interrogating the Magnus collection about its provenance. In reality, it's a broader and complex topic about Jewish cultural heritage worldwide, period. For all the reasons that we both know and that we are not, sometimes reasons we don't know so well. In this specific case, there are a few paths that brought these objects to Berkeley, which I think are significant. And we mentioned these in the exhibition. But again, this exhibition was preceded by another one a few years back. Emily, you were involved in that specifically on Morocco, on the materials that Magnus has from Morocco, and that I titled The Invisible Museum, because the thought was that these objects were never meant to be in a museum. They were meant to be objects of daily life, of lived experience. And so asking the question of how do they end up in a museum collection is essential. And not just to question colonialism or to decolonize museums, but really just to understand what we sort of start from, in the way we study these objects, we start from the idea that objects have a biography, they have a life. They begin somewhere, they circulate. We mapped some of these lives together today in so many different ways about what material culture is and does. And in this case, many of the objects were found in the places that Jews had vacated by California Jews, mostly associates of the old Magnus Museum before it became part of the universities in 1960s, 70s, early 80s, who traveled to North Africa and the Middle East, and they went to bazaars, to homes, to what was left of synagogues, and in ways that are no longer possible, luckily, this day. We're collecting objects, buying them, and bringing them back to America. Sometimes, instead, these objects were carried by migrants or refugees, depending on the Jewish migrants or refugees, depending on the situation, on the occasion. And they were brought to other countries where, like all migrants, they were sold to fund their migration process. And this is also something to keep into consideration. People will bring family precious heirlooms, and sometimes their own, sometimes others that they have themselves collected on the way. And then try to collections. And finally, of course, there were donations. There were families from the Muslim world who moved to America, moved to California, and who donated their heirlooms to the Magnus as a Jewish museum collection, as a way to kind of acknowledge their legacy, their history, their culture, and make it better known. So there are all these agendas, some of that sometimes conflicting agendas, that make this all possible. And I think it's good to be aware of them, because I still think it's good to be aware of history.
That's a wonderful answer to that. I think on that note, we're ready to close. I want to thank our two panelists, Francesco Spagnolo and Kamara Adamji, again, for all their work, including their contribution to our seminar today. And Francesco, I'll pass it back to you to close the.
Yes, well, many thank yous, but first of all to you, Emily, for being part of this project and wrapping up this exhibition. To Kamara, I cannot even begin to thank you, so I won't do it on Zoom. But it's been such a joy to work with you on this project, and the many students that if you caught from the chat a link to the exhibition page that archives the whole project, you'll see the names of every collaborator and the many students, like generations of students that have worked with us and that really provided fresh ideas and eyes and of course brain cells to our work. All of our museum collaborators, and then finally a thank you to everybody who made today's program possible. The sponsors made the project possible. The sponsors were listed at the beginning, and I'm not going to repeat them in case I forget someone, but they were all very engaged with us and with our project. So it wasn't just they were sponsors just because they believed in what we're doing. So that felt really relevant and important. And then the whole staff of the Magnus, Executive Director Hannah Weisman, who introduced us today, Laura Bratt, and Dan Alter, who today worked on the back end to make sure that things ran smoothly. And it was good to have this international, intercontinental conversation today. Every one of the panelists, so to begin with, every single panel, it was really good, and to be continued because we will be releasing a video of this. Of these proceedings, and then also we're looking into ways to publish a catalog based on the exhibition itself and some contributors like the ones that we gathered today with us. So thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, people at home, for listening. And with this, we close the project in plain sight.